As I was lulling my 5-year-old son to sleep, he pointed under the bed and whispered, "Mommy, why does she crawl out from under there every time you go on a business trip?" A cold dread washed over me. I secretly investigated and then took action. The next morning, 3 ambulances parked in front of our house, throwing the entire neighborhood into chaos. The corporate shuttle from the manufacturing plant upstate dropped me off at the entrance to our gated community. The watch on my wrist had just ticked past 9 p.m. I pulled my small rolling suitcase from the shuttle, politely declining the driver's offer to help carry my things. I wanted to savor this rare moment of quiet solitude for myself. I stood before our home, a 4-story townhouse with a neoclassical design that my husband and I had poured all of our savings from 8 years of hard work into. A warm, yellow light filtered through the blinds of our second-floor bedroom window, softening my heart and melting away some of the exhaustion from 3 grueling days of overseeing the new drug production line. To everyone else, I was a woman who had it all. A stable career as the head of R&D at a major pharmaceutical corporation, a husband who was the CEO of a successful commercial real estate firm, and a well-behaved son. I inserted the key into the lock, turning it as gently as possible to avoid making a sound. The first-floor living room was silent, save for the faint blue glow from the aquarium lamp casting dancing, watery patterns on the wall. Maria, the young au pair from my husband's home state, had probably already gone to her room after a long day of wrestling with household chores. I tiptoed up the wooden staircase. As I passed my husband's office, I saw a sliver of light from under the door. Daniel was still working. His silhouette, focused and serious, was cast long upon the wall. I smiled, feeling a surge of gratitude for his hard work in shouldering our family's finances during this difficult market. I decided not to disturb him and went straight to the bedroom to be with our son. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. My little boy, Teddy, was curled up in the middle of the large bed, his breathing even, his arms still clutching the tattered teddy bear he refused to replace. I gently placed my handbag on a chair, changed into a cool silk nightgown, and climbed into bed beside him. The warmth from his small body radiated into mine, relaxing every nerve. I kissed his forehead lightly, planning to nap for a bit before taking a shower. Suddenly, Teddy stirred. His large, dark eyes blinked open, looking at me. It seemed he hadn't been deeply asleep, or perhaps the coolness from my body had startled him awake. Teddy rubbed his eyes, his sleepy voice a soft murmur. "Mommy, you're home." I stroked his hair, whispering, "Yes, Mommy's home with her little bear. Go back to sleep." He didn't close his eyes immediately, but lay still for a moment, his gaze fixed on some indeterminate spot in the dim darkness. Then, without warning, he turned to me, his tiny finger pointing directly under the bed, where the edge of the bedspread hung down, completely obscuring the space beneath. My son's innocent question echoed in the silent room, but it made my entire body freeze as if doused with ice water. "Mommy, why does Maria always crawl out from under there when you're away on business?" I was stunned. Thinking I must have misheard, my heart skipped a beat before hammering wildly in my chest. I forced a smile, trying to keep my voice as calm as possible as I asked again, "What did you say, Teddy? What about Maria? You must have been dreaming. The space under the bed is too small for anyone to crawl into." Teddy shook his head vigorously, his expression startlingly serious for a 5-year-old trying to prove he was telling the truth. He tugged on my sleeve, whispering as if afraid someone would overhear. "I wasn't dreaming. Maria comes out from under there to play doctor with Daddy. Daddy said it's a secret grown-up game. If I tell you, the boogeyman will take me away." My ears were ringing. The sounds around me seemed to be swallowed up, leaving only the horrifying echo of my son's words. Playing doctor. A secret game. The words were like needles piercing my brain, sharp and agonizing. I sat bolt upright, staring down at the solid mahogany platform bed. This was the bed Daniel had insisted on replacing 2 years ago. Citing reasons that the old one was bad for my back and for the house's feng shui, he had personally ordered it, supervised its installation, and constantly praised its sturdiness and elegance. The bed was designed as a solid block, sitting flush with the floor, completely enclosed on all 4 sides. It was so heavy I had never considered moving it for cleaning, only using a handheld vacuum for the crevices. A vague but chilling fear began to creep up my spine, spreading throughout my body. I remembered the times I had returned from business trips to find the bedsheets freshly changed, the scent of fabric softener stronger than usual, as if to mask another smell. I recalled Maria's furtive, evasive glances whenever I walked into the kitchen unexpectedly, and even Daniel, my exemplary husband, always seemingly busy in his study every night. Could it be that right beneath the comfortable mattress where I slept every night, in what should be a woman's most sacred sanctuary of happiness, lay such a filthy secret? I looked at my son, who had drifted back to sleep from exhaustion, and my hand unconsciously tightened on the edge of the blanket. Around 1 a.m., Daniel tiptoed into the room. He lay down beside me gently, his arm wrapping around my waist, as had been his habit for 8 years. I forced my breathing to remain even, pretending to be fast asleep. In the darkness, I felt him kiss my hair lightly and whisper a heartfelt, "Good night, my love." Before, I would have smiled happily and snuggled closer into his embrace. But now, those words sounded like a mocking, grotesque charade. The next morning, I used the excuse of a headache from the weather change to call in sick from work. Daniel feigned concern, tenderly feeling my forehead and fussing over me before finally leaving for his office. Maria quickly prepared breakfast for Teddy and took him to preschool. When the sound of her small sedan faded away beyond the iron gate, the house fell into an unnerving silence. I sprang up, locking the bedroom door, my heart pounding as if it would burst from my chest. I am not the type of woman to fly into a jealous rage, to start a fight, or interrogate my husband without concrete proof. I rummaged through the specialized toolkit I had brought home from the lab, taking out a handheld UV blacklight and a small thermal imaging camera tools I typically use to check for chemical spills or biological traces at the plant. I began shining the UV light along the edges of the imposing mahogany bed. The purple light scanned over the glossy varnish, illuminating every grain of wood. Nothing seemed unusual on the 3 visible sides, but when I examined the baseboard at the head of the bed, the most hidden and hard-to-see area, I discovered an incredibly fine scratch on the hardwood floor, thin and uniform, like the mark of repeated friction from a heavy object moving along a fixed path. I used the thermal camera to scan the area under the bed. The screen displayed a temperature band slightly different from the surrounding floor, suggesting an empty space or airflow beneath. My instincts told me I was on the right track. I took out my industrial borescope camera, a long cable with a tiny camera at the end, capable of snaking into the tightest of spaces. I threaded the camera head into the minuscule gap between the mattress slats and the bed frame, a place the naked eye could never see. The connected phone screen began to display blurry, indistinct images from the darkness below. I switched on the camera's integrated LED light, and the scene that unfolded made me clap a hand over my mouth to stifle a cry of horror. Beneath the thick mattress and the high-end curved slat system was not the normal concrete subfloor. It was a gleaming hydraulic lift system, installed with extreme precision. A section of the floor beneath the bed had been expertly cut away, resting on an automated platform. With the flip of a switch, the entire slat system and this false floor would slide to the side or lower, revealing a secret passage leading directly to the floor below. I shuddered, recalling the layout of our house. Directly beneath our master bedroom was a small room Daniel called his wine cellar. He had it soundproofed with wood paneling, installed a fingerprint lock, and always kept the key to himself, claiming that fine wine required strict temperature and humidity control, and that outsiders could spoil it. I maneuvered the camera cable, trying to push it deeper through the gap in the false floor to see into the room below. The LED light swept across a corner of the room. There were no wine racks. Instead, there was a double bed with wine-red silk sheets, a velvet-upholstered tantra chair, and on a small table beside the bed, a scattering of torn condom wrappers and a few bizarre sex toys. But the thing that made the blood freeze in my veins wasn't this sordid evidence of an affair. The camera panned across the table, stopping on a stack of papers lying haphazardly next to a half-empty bottle of wine. Though the image was slightly blurry, I recognized the familiar logo of a major life insurance company and the bold words on the front page, "Life Insurance Policy. The insured, Evelyn Reed." My ears rang, and a cold current shot down my spine, colder than the air conditioning. Evelyn Reed was my name. Why was my life insurance policy in this secret, depraved room? And why had I never signed any such document? I retracted the camera, my hands trembling so badly I almost dropped my phone. I sank to the cold floor, leaning my back against the bed frame, a structure I now realized was not a cradle of happiness but the lid of a coffin, concealing a dark conspiracy waiting to swallow my son and me whole. The physical betrayal was merely the tip of the iceberg. Daniel wasn't just cheating. He was plotting something far more terrifying, a chess game in which my life might just be a pawn to be sacrificed. I sat at the dinner table, watching Daniel meticulously peeling an apple for Teddy. The light from the crystal chandelier shone on his face, highlighting his high nose bridge and the deep-set eyes I had once been so mesmerized by. He was still the same, the polished man, a respectable CEO in public and a model father at home. If it weren't for the borescope camera and the filthy images from under the bed, I would still believe I was the luckiest woman in the world. Daniel turned to me and placed a glass of warm milk on the table. The steam rose, carrying the rich scent of fresh milk. He smiled, the same smile that used to reassure me, but which now looked as cold as a scalpel. "Drink this while it's warm. You haven't been sleeping well." I added some Manuka honey a friend just gave me. "It's good for the nerves." I took the glass, feeling the warmth spread through my palm, but my heart was frozen. Good for the nerves. The phrase echoed in my head like a curse. I raised the glass to my lips, glancing at Daniel through the faint steam. He wasn't staring, but I could see him watching me from the corner of his eye, waiting for me to swallow the milky white liquid. I pretended to take a small sip, then suddenly clutched my mouth and coughed a few times. "Oh, it's too hot. I forgot to blow on it. Honey, can you get me some napkins?" Teddy dropped some apple on his shirt. Daniel quickly turned and walked towards the kitchen counter. Seizing the moment, I swiftly poured most of the milk into the personal thermos I had already opened under the table, then quickly wiped my mouth as if I had just taken a long drink. When Daniel returned, the glass on the table was more than half empty. He glanced at the glass, a flicker of concealed satisfaction in his eyes, before turning back to play with our son. That night, I waited until Daniel's steady snores filled the room before quietly getting up. I took the thermos containing the precious milk sample and silently hailed a cab to my company. As the head of R&D, I had my own key and access to the laboratory at any time. Under the cold white light of the lab, I tremblingly pipetted the milk into a test tube and ran it through the high-performance liquid chromatography machine. The low hum of the machine in the quiet night sounded like the countdown of a time bomb. The results on the computer screen made me grip the edge of the stone countertop to keep from collapsing. There was no Manuka honey. Instead, it was risperidone, an antipsychotic drug used for schizophrenia patients, but in a meticulously calculated dosage. If used long-term by a healthy person, it would cause symptoms like lethargy, memory loss, hand tremors, and emotional instability. I pieced together all the recent events, the times I'd forgotten my keys, the moments I'd snapped at Teddy for no reason, the constant feeling of exhaustion. It wasn't work, pressure, or age. I was being slowly poisoned by the man I shared my bed with. I remembered a furtive phone call of Daniel's I had accidentally overheard last week. His voice was sharp and anxious as he talked about a massive loan coming due and several coastal properties that were frozen assets. It turned out his real estate firm was just an empty shell. He was drowning in debt from failed speculative investments. And I, or rather, the multi-million-dollar biotech patent in my name was his only lifeline. But to sell it without my signature, he needed me to become legally incompetent, a mad wife, a mentally unstable mother. His plan wasn't just cruel. It stripped me of my dignity and my rights as a human being. On Sunday, Daniel lied that he was taking Maria to the farmer's market to buy organic produce for the week, but I knew better. Today was the scheduled prenatal appointment at the private clinic he had secretly booked. He needed the child in Maria's womb, likely to prepare for a new family after he had me committed to a psychiatric facility. After seeing their sleek car pull out of the driveway, I sent Teddy to his grandmother's, saying I needed to do a deep clean of the house. Once the house was completely empty, I took a deep breath and returned to the bedroom, the place that hid the passage to my personal hell. This time, I was more adept at activating the bed's sliding mechanism. The cellar door opened, and a musty smell mixed with cheap perfume wafted up. I walked down the narrow wooden steps, my heart pounding, but my steps were firm. The room was exactly as I had seen through the camera. But standing here in person, the feeling of suffocation and disgust was even more palpable. I put on rubber gloves and began to search every corner. Behind a fake wine rack, I found a section of the wood paneling that sounded hollow when I knocked. I pried the panel off to reveal a small, wall-mounted electronic safe. I didn't know the passcode, but my lab experience taught me how to find traces. I took out a vial of fluorescent powder used for detecting fingerprints on smooth surfaces and my UV blacklight. I lightly dusted the powder over the keypad, then turned off the room lights and switched on the UV lamp. The powder clung most brightly to 4 numbers, 1205. The numbers glowed in the dark like will-o'-the-wisps. 1205. May 12th, our wedding anniversary. I let out a bitter laugh. The sound echoed in the confined space like a sob. He used the most sacred date of our marriage to lock away his secrets of betrayal. The irony was crueler than 1,000 knives to the heart. The safe opened with a dry click. Inside, there was no cash or jewelry, only a thick file of documents. I flipped through the pages, my hands trembling. Loan agreements from predatory lenders with exorbitant interest rates, totaling tens of millions of dollars. The mortgage documents for this very house, where Teddy and I lived, which he had forged my signature on to submit to the bank, just waiting for the funds to be released. And at the very bottom, the most important document, the intellectual property transfer agreement for the biological formula, the very fruit of my life's work, the result of a decade of my youth spent in research. The recipient was a rival pharmaceutical company, the sworn enemy of my corporation. Daniel had sold me out. Not just our love, but my intellect, my sweat and tears, my entire career, all sold to pay off the debts from his foolish ambitions. He saw me as a cash cow, to be milked dry and then sent to the slaughterhouse. I photographed every document, then put everything back exactly as it was. As I closed the safe door, I felt that the naive woman who once loved and trusted her husband had died in this cellar. The person who walked out was no longer the Evelyn of yesterday. I was a mother who had to protect her child, a scientist who had to defend her honor. I returned to the lab early Monday morning, but not for my usual work. My mind was consumed by a single formula, the formula for retribution. I opened the botanical sample cabinet and took out a small container of processed hairs from the Mucuna pruriens bean, which we had collected to study natural irritants. These fine hairs contain serotonin and enzymes. Even a tiny amount on the skin, especially when pores are open from sweat or heat, causes an unbearable itching sensation that spreads with scratching, feeling like thousands of fire ants biting from beneath the skin. I carefully extracted, refined, and mixed it with an ultrafine, colorless, odorless, inert powder. Under a microscope, these tiny particles looked like sharp, invisible glass shards. I packaged the final product into a small pepper shaker, labeled it seasoning, and put it in my purse. Next, I prepared a diluted solution of pure capsaicin oil, the active component in chili peppers, which had been deodorized to retain only its ability to cause mild but persistent irritation to the mucous membranes of the eyes and nose. I didn't want to kill them. I wanted them to live in excruciating discomfort, to suspect each other in the very love nest they thought was their safe haven. That afternoon, while Maria was busy cooking in the kitchen and Daniel was still at work, I slipped back down into the secret cellar. Wearing a mask and gloves, I sprinkled the itching powder onto the wine-red bedsheets, concentrating on the pillow and middle areas. The fine powder disappeared into the fabric, invisible to the naked eye. I smeared a little on the doorknob and the switch for the bedside lamp, places their hands would surely touch during their clandestine moments. Then I opened the filter cover of the standing air conditioner in the corner and sprayed the diluted capsaicin solution evenly inside. When the unit was turned on, the cool air would carry the invisible, irritating molecules, enough to make their eyes water and their noses sneeze constantly. After finishing, I erased all my tracks, returned to the bedroom, and closed the cellar entrance. I stood before the mirror, adjusted my hair, and applied a touch of red lipstick. People often say that women in pharmacology are dull, obsessed with test tubes and data, but they forget that poison and medicine are sometimes separated only by dosage and intent. Daniel wanted to make me insane. I would turn his and his mistress's life of pleasure into a never-ending, itching nightmare. 2 days later, the effects of my biological warfare began to manifest. During dinner, I noticed Maria constantly squirming, her hand sneaking down to scratch her neck and arms. Her face was flushed and dotted with sweat, even though the dining room air conditioner was set to 72 degrees. Faint red blotches were beginning to appear under the simple cotton dress she often wore to project an image of modesty. I placed a piece of pot roast on Daniel's plate, my voice solicitous but my eyes fixed on Maria. "Maria, why is your face so red? Are you having an allergic reaction? The pollen count is high this season." Maria jumped, dropping her fork onto the table with a clatter. "Oh, no, Mrs. Reed, I'm fine. It's probably just the heat from the kitchen. I'm just a little itchy." She kept her head down, not daring to look at me. I knew what she was afraid of. A small-town girl in the big city with limited medical knowledge, secretly sleeping with her employer. Her greatest fear would be contracting an STD. The itching in sensitive areas would only amplify that fear in her mind. Daniel, sitting beside her, was no better off. His eyes were bloodshot, and he had to rub them every few moments, tears streaming down his face. He sneezed repeatedly, his voice thick and nasal. "What's wrong with the C in this house? Every time I go down to the first floor, my eyes start stinging like crazy," Daniel blurted out, almost revealing the cellar. I pretended to be naive and poured him a glass of water. "It's probably from staring at the computer all day. I'll call a technician tomorrow to service all the units. And honey, I've noticed Maria scratching a lot. I hope she hasn't caught some kind of skin disease. With a child in the house, it could be contagious." My mention of a contagious disease was a dart that hit 2 targets. Daniel immediately stopped eating and turned to look at Maria with suspicion and disgust. He was selfish and paranoid. He was surely wondering if his young mistress was as clean as she appeared, or if she had brought some disease with her that she was now passing to him. Maria, meanwhile, was trembling, her face drained of all color. She was terrified of being discovered and confused about her own body's condition. The more she scratched, the more the itch spread, growing as intense as a burning fire. That night, through the surveillance camera, I saw Maria tossing and turning in her bed, unable to sleep, sneaking into the bathroom repeatedly to check her body. And Daniel lay restless beside me, sighing heavily, getting up every so often to use eye drops to no avail. I lay still, listening to the scratching sounds of the betrayers, telling myself this was just the beginning. The seeds of suspicion I had planted in their minds were more toxic than any chemical, and I would water those seeds until they grew into a thorny tree that would tear their illicit relationship to shreds. That night, after making sure Daniel was sound asleep, I dared to open my phone and check the surveillance camera feed. The image from the first-floor bedroom showed Maria huddled on her bed, incessantly scratching her neck and arms, her face contorted in discomfort. She was holding her phone, her thumbs scrolling endlessly, the blue light illuminating her anxious face, giving her a ghostly appearance. I knew what she was doing. For an undereducated and fearful woman like Maria, the internet was the only place she dared to seek answers for her unmentionable worries. I opened my laptop and logged into an anonymous account I had meticulously built months ago on a private women's forum called Motherhood Whispers. My username was Sage Woman, with an avatar of a hand feeling a pulse next to a pot of brewing herbs, exuding an air of credibility and mystery. Sure enough, in the private questions section, a new post had appeared 10 minutes ago from an anonymous account. But from the clumsy phrasing and characteristic spelling errors, I immediately recognized it as Maria's. She wrote, "Dear Doctor, I've been itching all over for days, and it gets worse when I scratch. Could this be a disease I caught from a man? Also, my boyfriend has been very tired and weak lately. What can I do to keep the passion alive?" I smirked, my fingers typing out the first response, adopting the tone of a seasoned, worldly-wise herbalist. I commented, "Hello, my dear. Your itching could be due to a hormonal imbalance aggravated by anxiety and stress. As for your man, if he is often tired and has night sweats, it's a sign of adrenal fatigue and poor circulation. If not treated promptly, I'm afraid the flame of passion will soon die out, and he may seek comfort elsewhere. My pseudo-medical jargon, targeting her fear of losing her financial support, made her cling to me like a drowning person to a lifeline. Just a few minutes later, my private messages lit up. Maria messaged me with an urgent tone. "Sage woman, please help me. I'm so scared, and I don't dare go to a hospital. Do you have any good remedies? I'll pay anything." I didn't reply immediately, making her wait in suspense for about 15 minutes to add weight to my words. Then I slowly typed back, "A disease of the mind must be treated in the mind first. A disease of the body can be treated with herbs. I do not sell medicine. I only guide those who are destined to find me. For your itching, I will give you an herbal bath recipe to detoxify your system." As for your man, men his age face immense pressure, and an immoderate lifestyle can deplete their vitality. To keep a man, you must nourish him from the root. Maria hastily agreed. She complained that Daniel had been irritable lately, startled easily in his sleep, and their intimacy had become perfunctory. She didn't know that his fatigue was due to the crushing weight of his debts. I typed the decisive message, dropping the most tempting bait. "I have a family heirloom formula called Stallion's Vigor, specifically for treating exhaustion and helping men regain their youthful strength. But this remedy is very potent and must be used carefully and consistently. Would you like to try it?" On the other side of the screen, I imagined Maria's face lighting up as she replied instantly, "Yes, please, please help me. I will be forever grateful." The naive girl had no idea that the Stallion's Vigor she was about to receive was a one-way ticket to a state of paranoid delirium for them both. After gaining Maria's complete trust, I sent her a recipe for the tonic, which was actually a carefully measured combination of over-the-counter stimulants and mild psychoactive compounds. Maria obediently followed the herbalist's instructions, secretly buying the pills, grinding them into a powder, and mixing them into the herbal bone broth she often prepared separately for Daniel, under the pretext of nourishing him for his late nights of work. I watched on camera as Maria carried the steaming bowl of soup down to the wine cellar, her face beaming as if she were presenting an elixir of immortality to a king. Daniel took the bowl and slurped it down, even praising her for her improved cooking and thoughtfulness. He had no idea that every sweet spoonful was slowly eroding his last vestiges of sanity. Just 2 days after starting the tonic, Daniel began showing strange symptoms. At dinner, he frequently dropped his chopsticks, his eyes were dull, and he would occasionally jerk his head around as if hearing someone call his name. Once, while watching TV, he suddenly clutched his chest, his face pale, breaking out in a cold sweat. I pretended to be alarmed and rushed to his side. "Daniel, what's wrong? Is it your blood pressure again?" "Let me get the monitor." Daniel pushed my hand away, panting heavily. "No, I'm just tired. Don't make a fuss. My head is killing me." He didn't dare see a doctor, fearing the strange substances that might show up in his blood. More importantly, he was beginning to suspect his own body was betraying him. Maria, seeing her lover's strange behavior but also his increased vigor in the bedroom, an initial side effect of the stimulants, became even more convinced of Sage Woman's miraculous powers. She messaged me with profuse thanks and even asked if she should increase the dosage. I coolly typed back, "Haste makes waste, but if you want to hold on to him tighter, you can give him another dose in the morning." Maria's ignorance and greed became the sharpest knife, which I used her own hand to wield against the treacherous man. The pressure from his maturing loans and the buyers of my patent made Daniel increasingly impatient. He needed my certificate of mental incompetence, and he needed it fast. I noticed the dose of the white powder in my nightly milk had increased significantly. Instead of disposing of it all, I decided to drink a very small amount, just enough to create a slight dullness in my eyes while maintaining my mental clarity. I knew it was time for me to step onto the stage of this dark comedy and play the role he most desired, a madwoman. The opportunity came on a Saturday evening when Daniel invited an important business partner and his wife over for dinner. These people were influential investors, and Daniel wanted to use the image of a happy family to bolster his own crumbling reputation. The dinner was meticulously prepared. Maria bustled about, serving gourmet dishes. I wore a velvet navy blue dress with light makeup and sat making small talk with the guests. At first, everything went smoothly. I played the part of a demure, quiet wife, occasionally smiling in agreement with my husband's stories. But as the wine took effect and a lull fell over the conversation, I began my performance. When Maria placed a steaming tureen of soup on the table, I suddenly stared at her, then fixed my gaze on the soup as if seeing something horrific. I pointed a trembling finger at it, my voice breaking. Blood. Why is there blood? Are you trying to kill me? There's a ghost under the bed. The ghost crawled up and poisoned the soup. The entire table froze. The partner's wife dropped her spoon with a clatter. Daniel's face went pale. He quickly stood up and put a hand on my shoulder, his voice attempting calm but filled with embarrassment. Evelyn, what's wrong? Are you tired? It's just mushroom soup. There's no blood. I violently shrugged his hand off, jumping up and knocking over a glass of red wine. It spilled across the white tablecloth, the dark red stains spreading like real blood. I clutched my head, let out a piercing scream, and then scrambled under the table, cowering and trembling. Don't take me away! Don't inject me! Teddy, save Mommy! Your father is a monster! Teddy, who was playing in the living room, heard my screams and burst into tears, running to hug me. It tore my heart out to see my son so terrified, but I had to continue the act. I gently pushed him away, my eyes vacant, staring into space. You're not Teddy. Who are you? Get away from me. Daniel quickly scooped up Teddy, handed him to Maria to take away, then turned to his guests with the tormented expression of a long-suffering husband. I'm so sorry, everyone. My apologies. My wife. Her mental state has been unstable lately. The doctor says her postpartum depression has relapsed, and with her work stress, she has these delusions. I've been trying to get her help, but... The partner looked at me with pity and shook his head sympathetically. I'm sorry, man. That's tough. A big house like this, but with problems like these. Why don't you take her upstairs to rest? We can talk business another time. As the bedroom door closed, I heard Daniel let out a quiet sigh of relief. He looked at me, lying motionless on the bed, and a calculated, triumphant smirk played on his lips. He thought I had truly gone insane, and tonight's performance was the most vivid proof he needed to have me committed. The next morning, Daniel was dressed impeccably, but instead of going to his office, he said he was taking me for a general health checkup. I nodded obediently, my eyes dull and unresponsive, clutching Teddy's teddy bear like a lost child. Daniel helped me to the car, his gestures so tender that any outsider would have been moved to tears. The car didn't head towards any reputable public hospitals, but turned into a quiet side street in an outlying borough, stopping in front of a modest private clinic with a discreet sign. Albright Psychological and Neurological Clinic. The doctor who greeted us was a balding, middle-aged man with gold-rimmed glasses and a permanent smile, but his eyes darted around like a cheap salesman's. Daniel seemed to know him already. They exchanged a look of mutual understanding. Daniel placed a thick envelope on the desk and began to describe my condition. He showed the doctor a video on his phone, the scene of my outburst at the dinner party, secretly filmed by Maria under his direction. He embellished the story, claiming I often talked nonsense, was forgetful, and had even tried to harm our son. The doctor nodded with an air of professionalism, then turned to ask me a few perfunctory questions. What is your name? Do you know where you are? Do you hear strange voices in your head? I gave clipped, disjointed answers, sometimes remembering, sometimes forgetting, occasionally muttering about the person under the bed. He didn't need an EEG or any in-depth psychological tests. After just 15 minutes of a cursory interview, he put his pen to the medical record. His scrawled but ruthless handwriting delivered the diagnosis: severe depression with acute psychosis. Loss of behavioral control, recommends inpatient treatment and special guardianship. Holding the diagnosis, Daniel couldn't hide his satisfaction. He clapped the doctor on the shoulder. Thank you so much, doctor. I'm counting on you to help my wife recover. He turned to me, his voice as sweet as if cooing to a child. See, honey? The doctor says you're sick and need medicine to get better. Be a good girl and take your medicine, and I'll take good care of you." I took the bottle of brightly colored pills the doctor handed me, laughing silently to myself. To him, this medical report was a golden ticket to seize my assets. To me, it was ironclad evidence of the depraved collusion between him and this soulless doctor. From the day she held the medical report confirming my mental illness, Maria seemed to shed her timid, small-town shell completely. She moved through the house with the air of a future mistress, a posture so full of conceited awkwardness it made me sick. Whenever Daniel was out and I was feigning a drug-induced stupor, Maria would brazenly open my wardrobe. She'd hold my expensive silk dresses against her body, twirling in front of the mirror with a smug smile. She even dared to use my favorite Chanel lipstick, smearing the deep red across her chapped lips, trying to mimic a sophistication she could never achieve. Maria's arrogance peaked when she began to interfere with raising Teddy. That day, Teddy accidentally spilled a glass of orange juice on the genuine leather sofa in the living room. Before, Maria would have rushed to clean it up and comfort him. But today, she stood with her hands on her hips, pointing a finger at my son's face and yelling, "What do you think you're doing? Do you have any idea how much this sofa costs? Your mother's crazy. Are you trying to wreck the house too?" My son shrank back in fear, tears welling in his eyes as he stammered an apology. I sat in my bedroom, watching the scene on my phone screen, my heart feeling as if it were being squeezed in a vice. I wanted to storm out and slap that shameless woman, to tear apart the mouth spewing such venom at my child, but reason held me back. I knew that if I acted rashly now, all my painstaking patience would be for nothing. I had to let her arrogance inflate to its maximum, like an overfilled balloon, waiting for a single pinprick to burst. I swallowed my tears, engraving her every gesture and word into my memory. The more she acted out, the more complacent Daniel became. Seeing me lethargic and dazed every day, he felt secure, openly carrying on with his mistress in his study without even bothering to lock the door. He had no idea that his overconfidence was his Achilles heel. I continued to play the part of the mad wife, sometimes laughing hysterically or crying for no reason, which only made Maria more contemptuous. She started ordering me around like a servant. "Evelyn, get me a glass of water. Evelyn, move. You're in the way." I silently complied, my eyes vacant, but my heart was sharpening the blade of truth. The arrogance of the other woman was the perfect catalyst to accelerate the self-destruction of this unholy alliance. To bring down a castle, you don't need to attack from the outside. You just need to remove the cornerstone. For a patriarchal, image-obsessed, and calculating man like Daniel, that cornerstone was his pride and his bloodline. I knew Daniel was immensely proud of Teddy, seeing him as a perfect copy of himself, his heir. He could betray his wife, but he would never accept being cuckolded or raising another man's child. His overconfidence in his ability to control women would be his fatal flaw. Taking advantage of a time when Daniel took Maria to the supermarket, I sat down at my computer and, using the expert Photoshop skills I'd honed in college, created a nuclear bomb. I scanned a blank DNA test result form from a reputable genetics lab I had collaborated with in the past, then edited the details. Father's name, Daniel Reed. Child's name, Theodore Teddy Reed. Conclusion, no paternal genetic relationship found. I even carefully forged the lab director's signature and the official seal, printing it on thick, slightly off-white paper to make it look authentic. Looking at the flimsy piece of paper, I knew it held more destructive power than any poison. That evening, as was his habit, Daniel would read for about 30 minutes before bed. He was in the middle of How to Win Friends and Influence People, a bitter irony for a two-faced man. I stealthily tucked the test result between the pages he had bookmarked, then placed the book back on his nightstand at an angle where the paper would fall out the moment he picked it up. Then, I drank a sip of water, lay down, and began my performance. I pulled the covers up to my chin, pretending to shiver as if with a fever, muttering nonsensical phrases. Around 10:30 p.m., Daniel entered the room. He glanced at me with disgust before getting into bed. He picked up his book, intending to read a few pages. My heart pounded under the thick blanket. Each second felt like an eternity. A rustle of paper, followed by a dead silence that enveloped the room. I didn't dare breathe, peeking through a tiny gap in the covers. I saw Daniel's hand freeze. The paper had fallen onto his lap. He picked it up, squinting to read it. At first, there was bewilderment, his brow furrowed, then utter shock. He flicked on the bright bedside lamp, holding the paper close to his eyes, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. His face turned from red to pale, then to a purplish rage. His breathing grew heavy and ragged, like a blacksmith's bellows. The bomb had detonated. A guttural, animalistic roar tore through the night silence. Daniel violently threw back my blanket and grabbed me by the collar of my nightgown, hauling me up. "You goddamn bitch! Get up! Get up now!" he screamed, his voice cracking with uncontrollable fury. I feigned confusion, my eyes dull, and stammered, Daniel, why are you yelling at me? I was sleeping." "Where's Teddy?" He shoved the DNA test in my face, his hand trembling. "Look at this. What the hell is this? Explain it to me right now. Whose son is Teddy? I've been supporting you and your bastard for 8 years, just for you to cheat on me like this?" He slapped me hard across the face. The metallic taste of blood filled my mouth, but I felt no pain, only a grim satisfaction. This physical pain was nothing compared to what he had done to me. I held my cheek and began to cry, not in a plea for mercy, but with the bewildered sobs of a madwoman. "What are you talking about? Teddy is your son." "No, wait. He's the nice handyman's son," I giggled, my eyes wild. "The one who always came to fix the plumbing when you were away. He was so nice. He gave me candy and money." My fabricated, nonsensical words were like gasoline on a fire. Daniel truly lost it. He couldn't believe his educated, respectable wife could utter such filth. In his mind, the image of a virtuous wife shattered completely, replaced by that of a promiscuous cheat who took advantage of her husband's absence. He grabbed my hair, about to strike me again, but then he stopped. He let go, pushing me so I stumbled back onto the bed and then paced the room like a wounded animal, clutching his head and cursing under his breath. He replayed every business trip of mine, every time he was away, every moment I seemed distant. The entire past was now twisted through the lens of suspicion. He concluded that I was either faking insanity to hide my guilt or had genuinely gone mad from a guilty conscience. Either way, the pride of a successful man had been trampled. Daniel's rage didn't stop with me. He began to view everything with a sick, paranoid suspicion. If his wife of 8 years, educated and respected, could betray him so brazenly, what guarantee was there that a young, uneducated au pair like Maria was faithful? He remembered the times Maria took longer than usual at the grocery store, the times she smiled to herself while texting on her phone. His inherent paranoia, amplified by the side effects of the tonic I'd had Maria give him, pushed him into extreme delusion. The next morning, Maria tiptoed into the living room with a breakfast tray. Sensing the tense atmosphere, with Daniel sitting stone-faced on the sofa, she decided to use her good news to soothe her lover. She placed the tray on the coffee table, knelt by his feet, and cooed, "What's wrong, honey? Don't be mad at her. Why bother with a crazy person? I have some news that will cheer you up." She took his hand and placed it on her belly, her eyes sparkling. "I'm 2 weeks late. I took a test. It's positive. We're going to have a baby, Daniel." Maria expected Daniel to be overjoyed, to pull her into his arms and promise her a happy future. But his reaction left her speechless. He snatched his hand back as if he'd touched fire and glared at her, his eyes as sharp as knives. "Pregnant? Are you sure it's mine?" His question was a slap in the face. Maria was stunned. "What are you saying? I've only been with you. I'm in this house all the time. How could I?" "Shut up," Daniel roared, swiping the breakfast tray off the table. The hot food splattered across the floor. "My wife swore she loved only me too, and she gave birth to a bastard. You women are all liars." He stood up, jabbing a finger in her face. "You think I'm stupid? A young, beautiful thing like you, willing to be cooped up in this house with an old man like me? Or are you just trying to trap me for my money?" Maria sobbed, pleading and swearing her fidelity, but Daniel ignored her. He started rummaging through her purse, checking her phone. When he found her posts on the forum complaining about her lover's fatigue, the blood rushed to his head. He hurled her phone against the wall, shattering it. "So you're telling the whole internet I'm weak, huh? Let's see what other tricks you have." He turned to her, his voice chillingly calm. "This afternoon, we're going for an amniocentesis and a DNA test. If that baby isn't mine, I'll throw you out on the street." Maria collapsed onto the floor, sobbing silently amidst the spilled food. She couldn't understand how everything had turned so horrifically wrong. Her dreams of a new life had just begun to blossom, only to be hit by a freezing blast of reality. Meanwhile, I sat on the upstairs landing, hugging a teddy bear, silently observing the masterpiece of a drama unfolding before me. Horrified, Maria looked up at him. Though uneducated, she knew that an amniocentesis on such an early-stage pregnancy was incredibly risky and could cause a miscarriage. But the baby is too small, Daniel," she stammered. "The doctors say it's dangerous." Daniel wouldn't listen. He turned to the liquor cabinet, poured a stiff drink, and downed it in one gulp. "Dangerous? Or are you just afraid of being exposed? Let me tell you something. I'm not a fool to be led by the nose a second time." Watching this scene, I felt a complex mix of emotions. These two traitors, who thought they would enjoy wealth and happiness built on my pain, were now tearing each other apart. Seizing the opportunity while Daniel dragged a hysterical Maria to a crony's private clinic for the cruel test, I quickly changed clothes and took a cab to a discreet coffee shop tucked away in a quiet alley. The person I was meeting was Mark, an old college friend who was now a seasoned detective in the Economic Crimes Division. Mark sat in a secluded corner, his stern face etched with concern when he saw my haggard appearance. I didn't beat around the bush. I placed a small black USB drive on the wooden table. "This is everything I've gathered." It contained everything from bank statements and loan shark agreements to audio recordings of Daniel discussing asset concealment and money laundering through fraudulent insurance contracts. Mark plugged the drive into his laptop, his brow furrowed as he scrolled through the files, the screen's glow reflecting a grim expression on his face. After a long silence, he took off his glasses and looked me straight in the eye, his voice low. "Evelyn, this evidence of his financial crimes is solid. The amount of money and the methods used are enough to indict him for fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering." He paused. "But regarding your claim that he intended to poison and kill you, we still lack direct evidence. The drug samples you analyzed, the bed mechanism, they're circumstantial. His lawyer could argue he bought the drugs for himself." I gripped the warm mug in my hands, letting the heat calm me. I knew Mark was right. The law requires hard proof, not just inference. I looked at him, my gaze unwavering. "I know. That's why I need your help with one more thing. Get a team ready. Within the next 24 hours, I will give you what you need, a direct confession from his own mouth and from his mistress's." Mark looked at me, concerned. "Evelyn, what are you planning? Don't do anything reckless. He's a cornered animal now, and they're the most dangerous." I managed a small, sad smile filled with resolve. "I'm not being reckless. I'm just giving them what they deserve. Trust me, Mark, this play needs a finale, and I will be the one to write it." I leaned in and whispered my detailed plan for that night. As he listened, Mark's face shifted from shock to a grim nod of agreement. He squeezed my hand firmly, as if to transfer his strength. "All right, I'll have a unit stationed near your house. As soon as we get the signal, we'll move in. Be extremely careful, Evelyn, and stay in contact." Leaving the coffee shop, a light drizzle began to fall. The cool mist settled on my hair, but it cleared my head. There was no turning back, and I didn't want to. This fight was no longer just about protecting my assets or my honor. It was about protecting my life and my son's. I hailed a cab back to that cold, imposing house, thinking to myself, "Daniel, you've planned your whole life, but you forgot one thing. The person who best understands the reaction of an explosive is the one who created it." When Daniel and Maria returned, the atmosphere in the house was as somber as a funeral. Maria walked with difficulty, her face ashen, one hand cradling her lower abdomen. The amnio procedure had clearly not gone well. Daniel, meanwhile, sat sullenly on the sofa, drinking heavily. He was waiting for the expedited test results that would decide Maria's fate. Seeing me come down the stairs, he looked up, his bloodshot eyes filled with loathing. But contrary to my usual insane state, today I wore a simple white dress, my hair neatly tied back, my face exuding a strange serenity. I walked over and sat in the armchair opposite him. "Daniel, can we talk?" My voice was clear, with no trace of the stuttering or delusion. Daniel was taken aback. He set down his glass, narrowing his eyes suspiciously. "You're lucid now?" he asked sarcastically. I nodded, offering a faint smile. "I've been taking the medicine, doctor. Albright prescribed, and my head feels much clearer. I remember things now, and I know I've become a burden to you." I paused, watching his facial muscles relax slightly before delivering the final blow. "I agree to a divorce. I'll sign the papers and voluntarily check myself into a facility, just as you want. I only ask for one thing. Let me cook one last family dinner, as a peaceful farewell so that Teddy won't have to see his parents hating each other." Daniel was stunned. He never imagined it would be this easy. He had expected to use force, even to have me committed against my will. But now, the prey was walking willingly into the trap. His suspicion halved, replaced by a surge of ecstatic joy at the thought of the massive fortune about to fall into his hands. He suppressed a triumphant grin and feigned a sigh. "It's good that you're thinking clearly. I never wanted this either. It's your illness. All right, fine. You can cook tonight. I'll have Maria help you." Dinner was served under the warm glow of the dining room light, featuring all of Daniel's old favorites: pot roast, braised short ribs, and gourmet mac and cheese. I sat at the head of the table, serving food to Daniel and Teddy, my gestures as tender as if no betrayal had ever occurred. Maria stood meekly by, an unwilling servant, her eyes a mixture of fear and envy. Daniel ate heartily, perhaps relieved of his mental burden, or perhaps celebrating his impending victory. "Eat up," I said softly. "I marinated this roast all afternoon." Daniel nodded, chewing greedily. "Yeah, it's been a while since you cooked a decent meal. When you're at the facility, try to rest and get better. I'll bring Teddy to visit often." I smiled, my heart an Arctic wasteland. The meal ended. I cleared the dishes while Daniel went to the living room to smoke a cigarette, his mood visibly euphoric. He called his lawyer, instructing him to prepare the divorce and asset transfer documents for the next morning. I washed the dishes, the sound of running water drowning out the frantic beating of my heart. When I was done, I dried my hands and walked into the living room. Daniel saw me and went to the kitchen. He returned a moment later with a glass of orange juice. The vibrant liquid shimmered in the tall crystal glass, garnished with a thin orange slice. "Drink this. It'll help you regain your strength." I just squeezed it. I added some of the vitamins the doctor prescribed. Daniel handed me the glass, his eyes fixed on mine, holding a cruel urgency. I knew this glass contained more than just vitamins. With the sedatives and sleeping pills he had, this dose was enough to put me into a long sleep, perhaps one I would never wake from, or wake from as a mindless shell. He wanted to ensure I caused no trouble tonight. Or worse, he was setting the scene for my suicide by overdose due to depression. I took the glass, its chill seeping into my fingertips. I raised it to my nose, the strong scent of orange masking everything else. I looked up at Daniel and asked a random question. "Daniel, if you could go back in time, would you still have married me?" He flinched, then gave a short, dismissive laugh. "What kind of crazy talk is that? Just drink it and go to bed." I nodded and raised the glass to my lips. I took a large gulp but didn't swallow, holding the liquid in my mouth. The bitter taste of the drugs began to dissolve on my tongue. I feel sick," I mumbled, clutching my mouth as I rushed to the first-floor bathroom, slamming and locking the door behind me. I spat the entire mouthful of orange juice into the toilet and flushed it down. Then I rinsed my mouth repeatedly, staring at my reflection. My eyes were sharp and clear, no longer holding any trace of submissiveness. I took my phone out of my dress pocket and sent a quick text to Mark. "Fish in the net. Move in 15. Outside, Daniel was banging on the door. "Evelyn, what's wrong? Open the door!" I faked the sounds of retching, then called out in a weak, slurred voice, as if heavily drugged, "I'm so dizzy. I just want to lie here for a minute. Don't come in." Hearing my slurred speech, Daniel was reassured. He muttered, "The drugs kicked in fast. Good. Let her lie there and be out of my hair." His footsteps faded away. I pressed my ear to the door and heard him call to Maria. "She's out of it. Let's go down to the cellar, honey. We have to celebrate tonight. By tomorrow, I'll have everything." When the click of the cellar's lock echoed dryly, I felt as if I had personally closed the door on my past. 8 years of my youth, the sweet memories and the bitter humiliations, were now sealed behind that thick wooden door. I stood silently in the dark, my hand still on the cold cellar hatch, listening to their heavy footsteps and loud, cheerful chatter echoing from below. They thought they were entering a paradise of pleasure, oblivious that this paradise was separated from hell by only a thin wooden floor. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart, then walked to the smart home control panel hidden behind an oil painting on the wall. My trembling finger found the main breaker for the hydraulic system and flipped it down. The faint whir of the motor ceased, meaning the lift was completely disabled. The cellar was now a sealed box. I took the remote control for the ventilation system from my pocket, whose wiring I had painstakingly reconfigured days earlier. Instead of pumping in fresh air, the powerful fan would now reverse its flow, pulling smoke from a special canister I had installed in the vent. It was a mix of cold CO2 and a mild botanical irritant, creating the effect of a fire without causing lethal asphyxiation. I pressed the button. A soft hiss, like a demon's sigh, filled the air. I pictured streams of cold, white smoke seeping through the vents, slowly filling the lavish room below. I walked out onto the balcony. The night wind was cool against my skin, a stark contrast to the heat simmering inside me. I looked down at the quiet street, at the lonely yellow streetlights, and thought, "Daniel, you wanted to bury me in darkness. Tonight, I'll let you know what it feels like to be buried alive." I returned to the bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and turned on the tablet connected to the cellar camera. The image was hazy with white smoke, but I could still see the chaos beginning. Daniel and Maria were in a full-blown panic. Daniel threw himself against the cellar door, but his pounding was met only by the silence of thick wood and reinforced steel. Maria was huddled on the tantra chair, clutching her throat, coughing violently. The oxygen in the room was depleting. Through my headphones, I heard Maria scream, her voice strained with terror. "Daniel, there's someone standing in the corner. It's her. It's Evelyn." She pointed a trembling finger into the empty space, her eyes wide with horror. In her oxygen-deprived, drug-addled delirium, the image of the wife she had always feared and envied had become a real nightmare. Daniel turned, but in his own hallucinating state, he no longer saw Maria as his young mistress. He rubbed his eyes and yelled, "Get away! Don't come near me! I paid you! I don't owe you anything!" He started flailing his arms wildly, as if fighting off the invisible loan sharks closing in on him. The smoke grew thicker, obscuring their forms, leaving only the materializing ghosts of their sins. Daniel tripped and fell, his forehead striking the corner of a cabinet, blood streaming down his face. He seemed to feel no pain. He crawled on the floor, muttering numbers, loan amounts, and the names of people he had swindled. "Don't burn it! Don't! I'll sell the patent! I'll have the money!" I watched the two of them writhing in the pit they had dug for themselves, feeling not a shred of pity. The raw, ugly truth was being laid bare in the most brutal way. They didn't see each other. They only saw their own deepest fears. Maria feared retribution, and Daniel feared financial ruin and prison. The so-called true love they boasted about was now as thin as smoke, vanishing at the first brush with mortality. When survival instincts kick in, the civilized veneer is stripped away, leaving only the selfish, feral animal beneath. In the smoky cellar, Daniel spotted a single gas mask, a prop I had intentionally left in the display cabinet as a cruel piece of bait. He scrambled towards it, shattered the glass with his elbow, and snatched it. But Maria saw the same glimmer of hope. She lunged, trying to wrench the mask from his hands. "Let go! I'm your man! You have to give it to me!" Daniel roared, kicking her hard in the stomach. He had completely forgotten the air he was supposedly expecting. His own life was all that mattered. Maria fell backward, but her hands clung to the mask's strap. She screamed through her tears, "You bastard!" You're trying to kill your own child too? You coward! You said you'd protect us, and now you're trying to save yourself?" As they struggled, their darkest secrets poured out. Maria, sobbing, yelled, "You told me to put pills in her milk to make her crazy. You told me to act along to steal her assets, and now you're leaving me to die in here?" Daniel was just as vicious. He slapped her so hard her lips split open. "Shut your mouth, you greedy bitch! You think I didn't know you were slipping me aphrodisiacs to make me listen to you? That thing in your belly? Are you even sure it's mine? Or does it belong to the pizza delivery guy?" Their words, captured clearly by the audio system, were sharper than any knife. Daniel accused Maria of greed. Maria accused Daniel of fraud, money laundering, and plotting to murder his wife. They exposed each other without mercy, stripping bare the facade of righteousness they had so carefully constructed. The gas mask, pulled back and forth, finally ripped in two, becoming as useless as their rotten relationship. I glanced at my laptop, where the live streaming software showed a stable connection. The video from the cellar was blurry, but the audio was crystal clear, capturing every gasp and curse. The link had been sent to a carefully curated list of recipients: the board of directors of the rival company trying to buy my patent, the Civilized Neighborhood Community Facebook group where Daniel always played the model husband, and most importantly, Mark's personal email. On the screen, a disheveled and dirty Daniel, his face contorted with rage and fear, was screaming at Maria. "I forged the loan applications. I mortgaged this house. Who did I do it all for? For you. And now you're trying to kill me?" Maria, her hair a mess, her clothes torn, was coughing and shrieking back. "You're a liar! You lied to your wife, and you lied to me! You said you were rich, but you're drowning in debt. I hate you." I watched the comments explode on the neighborhood Facebook group live stream. Shocked emojis, angry faces, disgusted reactions. "Oh my God, is that CEO Daniel Reed? This is horrifying. He's a monster. I feel so bad for his wife, living with a demon all these years." The image Daniel had spent years building, the successful businessman, the happy family man, crumbled to dust in minutes. I took off the headphones. "This is my final gift to you, Daniel," I thought. "You wanted to be famous, to be admired. Well, today the whole world will know your name as the most despicable traitor imaginable." Amidst the cacophony of screams and coughs from the laptop speakers, I picked up my phone. My finger swiped across the cool screen and dialed Daniel's number, a number I had known by heart for a decade. The ringtone sounded shrill and bizarre in the confined, smoky space of the cellar beneath my feet. On the camera feed, I saw Daniel jump. He looked around wildly, as if hearing a call from the underworld. He fumbled on the floor, his grimy hand closing around the glowing phone. He pressed it to his ear, his voice broken. "Hello? Who is it? Help me. There's a fire. My wife. She's crazy. She's burning down the house." I sat back in the comfortable armchair, took a sip of water, and let the cool liquid soothe my throat. I spoke, my voice as calm and gentle as a breeze, but as sharp as a scalpel. "My dear husband, who exactly are you calling crazy? Is today's playing doctor game not fun anymore?" The line went silent, save for his ragged breathing and Maria's whimpers in the background. Daniel seemed to recognize my voice, not the voice of the mad, dazed wife of the past few months, but the voice of the intelligent, sharp Evelyn from 8 years ago. He stammered, his teeth chattering. You didn't take the pills? Evelyn, what are you doing? Open the door. I'm begging you, open the door. I'm going to die." I laughed softly, a bitter sound in the large room. "Are you afraid of dying, Daniel? When you put poison in my milk, did you think I might be afraid of dying? When you and your mistress plotted to lock me in an asylum to sell my assets, did you ever think about how I felt?" Each question was a nail driven into his oxygen-starved brain. He started screaming, shifting from begging to threats. "You're a vicious, evil woman. You'll go to prison for murder. Open this door right now." I watched him on the screen, feebly trying to smash his phone against the wall. I lowered my voice, whispering my final words before hanging up. "Don't worry, my darling husband. I'm a law-abiding citizen. I don't kill people. I'm just helping you two see each other's true faces. Enjoy the last moments of your true love." I disconnected the call, leaving him to his despair. In the darkness of the cellar, with death looming, their masks had fallen away, leaving only the raw, brutal reality of the human heart. 15 minutes later, the tranquility of the wealthy suburb was shattered by wailing sirens. The flashing red and blue lights of police cars and fire trucks painted frantic strokes across the stately homes. Neighbors, who usually kept to themselves, poured out onto the street, whispering and staring. I stood on the second-floor balcony, watching the chaos below, my heart as calm as a placid lake. Mark led the tactical team, breaking through the iron gate. The thud of a battering ram against the front door signaled the end of a counterfeit empire. I ran downstairs and unlocked the door, my face a carefully practiced mask of horror. Mark gave me a subtle nod of reassurance. Firefighters quickly located the cellar entrance based on my directions. "Down there! My husband and the au pair. They're trapped! There's so much smoke, please save them." When the hatch was pried open, a plume of white smoke in reality, just harmless cold vapor and theatrical fog billowed out. Firefighters with oxygen masks descended. Minutes later, they emerged carrying 2 limp bodies. Maria was unconscious from fear and exhaustion. Daniel was barely conscious, his eyes wide and wild, muttering incoherently and swatting at invisible ghosts. The scene horrified the onlookers. The respectable man who lectured on morality at homeowners association meetings now looked like a cornered beast. The ambulances were waiting. Paramedics rushed them onto stretchers. As I stumbled out, playing the role of a woman who had just escaped death, the cameras flashed. My hair was artfully disheveled, my face pale and makeup-free. I leaned heavily on a young female officer. "Please, don't take pictures of my son," I pleaded weakly, my voice trembling. "He's just a child." A wave of sympathy washed over the crowd. Brenda, the head of the HOA, rushed over. "You poor thing, you and the boy get to the hospital. Let the police handle this." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "Thank you. I was so scared. They were going to burn the house down. They said they were going to kill us." My half-finished sentence ignited the crowd's fury. On the way to the hospital, I looked back. Our house, once our pride and joy, now stood cold and desolate, wrapped in yellow police tape, a tombstone for our 8-year marriage. I held Teddy, who had slept soundly through it all, thanks to the noise-canceling headphones I had put on him. I kissed his forehead. "I'm sorry, little bear, but I promise, from now on, your world will only be peaceful." I closed my eyes. My performance as the perfect victim was a success, but I knew the wound in my heart would take a long, long time to heal. The next morning, the hospital was swarming. The story of the CEO, who trapped his family in a cellar, had gone viral. Reporters camped out in the hallway. A man in an expensive suit entered my room, Mr. Thompson, the investor Daniel was selling my patent to. "Miss Reed," he began with a strained smile. "These things are best kept private. If this gets messy, the company's stock will tank, and you and your son will suffer." He slid a thick envelope towards me. "A token of my sympathy. Perhaps you could tell the police it was just an electrical fire." I looked at the envelope, then at him, my heart filled with contempt. I slowly sat up, pulled the IV from my arm, and played the audio recording from Daniel's computer of their conversation from last week. Thompson's voice was clear. "Just get that psych evaluation for your wife, and I'll wire the first 30% to your offshore account." His face turned ashen. Where did you get that?" I smiled coldly and hit send, forwarding the file to a group of financial journalists waiting outside. "Mr. Thompson, I don't need your money. I need you to answer to the law for conspiracy to commit fraud." I raised my voice. "Reporters, please come in. I have some important evidence to share." The door burst open, and the room exploded in flashbulbs. In the cold, sterile interrogation room, Daniel was a broken man. At first, he denied everything, blaming Maria, claiming she had seduced and manipulated him. But Mark simply played the live stream video and produced the digital journal I had recovered from Daniel's cloud account, detailing his methodical poisoning of me. The digital ink, his own words, became his death sentence. He slumped over the table, his shoulders shaking with sobs not of remorse, but of regret for his lost future. Daniel was sentenced to life in prison for attempted murder, fraud, and money laundering. Maria received 15 years for her role as an accomplice. I signed the divorce papers in the courtroom, finally closing the most painful chapter of my life. I walked out of the courthouse holding Teddy's hand. We no longer had a big house or fancy cars, but we had freedom and peace, the most priceless assets of all. Our old life was in ruins, but on that rubble we would grow again, stronger than before. After settling all legal matters, I used my remaining savings to move with Teddy to a small rented apartment. I didn't open a bakery or dedicate myself to charity. I am a scientist, and the best way to heal was to return to my passion. With help from old colleagues, I started a small, independent lab called Auntie. We focused on developing affordable treatments for postpartum depression, a cause I now understood on a visceral level. The smell of chemicals, once just part of a job, now smelled like hope. Mark visited often, becoming a quiet, steady presence in our lives. We never spoke of romance, but I knew we were both waiting for old wounds to truly heal. 3 years later, on a sunny afternoon on the North Carolina coast, I watched Teddy, now a tall, tan 8-year-old, laughing as he chased the waves. The sea breeze blew through my hair, washing away the last dust of the past. That morning, I had received a call from the prison. Daniel had passed away from a stroke. I felt a long, slow exhale release from my chest. His death was the final, quiet end to a sad story. Teddy ran up to me. "Mommy, why do you look sad?" I smiled and shook my head. "I'm not sad, honey. I'm just thinking about a chemical reaction." I took his small hand and pointed to the vast ocean. "You know, life is like a big experiment. Sometimes you get impurities, unexpected reactions, things that cause explosions and pain. But it's through that difficult process of distillation that you remove the dross and are left with the purest crystals. Daniel was an impurity, a variable that skewed my results. But because of that error, I found the correct formula for my own happiness, my freedom, my son's laughter, and the meaningful work I do every day." I stood up and brushed the sand from my dress. In the distance, the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant, magnificent colors. Tomorrow, the sun would rise again, and I knew the chemical reaction of happiness, for me, was just beginning to crystallize.